My name is Lars Schreiber, and my favorite Power Query feature is the ability to create custom functions in M. Welcome to Power Query Magic.
Lars, how are you?
A bit nervous, honestly, but I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for coming on the show. I know you're a busy man. You've got young twin boys. It's how have you got time to do this? I don't know. But
first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Honestly, my wife was kind enough to take them outside so we don't have any noise in the background.
And you live in Hamburg?
Yes.
Okay, so let me set a scene for you. You're in one of Hamburg's beer halls. Okay, let's say maybe Brauhaus Johann Albrecht or somewhere like that. Is that a good one?
I think so. I'm not so much into... The last 3 years have been quite isolating due to the twins and then the pandemic. But of course, I know some Brauhäuser here in Hamburg.
Excellent. Okay, so let's say you've got the luxury of being outside with a friend somewhere. You've known them for a few years, and they sort of lean over to you and they say, "Explain to me again what it is you do for a living. What's your job?" What do you say to them?
If I have to explain it by words, just by words, I would say I create tools or I help people create their own tools to make better decisions from the data. But because I had this discussion with my parents many times in the past, I decided to create some use cases on my website. And as you know, there's this wonderful ability to embed Power BI reports into publicly available websites so that people can just see what I do. And when this question really occurs on a party or somewhere, I just open a browser or my app on my mobile phone and show them what I do. And that's a good idea. It works.
I like that. That's
even with customers, this is a good idea because they might have an idea what Power BI is, but you don't know their background. And only because they're asking for Power BI, that doesn't mean that they really need Power BI. I had customers who wanted to have a Power BI solution, and in the end, it turned out what they needed is a PDF in a OneDrive. So sometimes they get confused.
I certainly come across people who end up just needing an Excel solution.
Yeah.
They think they want a Power BI solution, but really it's just Excel. And when I show them this stuff, this thing called Power Query that exists, and this thing called, the data model, and you can do it all in Excel, their eyes light up. And especially financy people, who just live and breathe Excel, they sort of get really excited about this. And Power BI's got its place, and it's awesome at all sorts of things. But the beauty of being able to use both with these tools, it's so good. So good.
Yeah, and many people don't even know that all these Power BI tools exist in Excel. So, of course, they want to have a Power BI solution, not because Excel is bad, but they don't know that these tools exist in Excel already for years.
Totally.
So I agree. It's not necessarily the right way to go for Power BI when all you need is a automated import from different data sources to create a table that you use in Excel anyway.
Yeah. Did you ever use Power View?
Yes.
Did you?
Yeah.
How was your experience?
In the beginning, it was amazing because it was the first time to have interactive reports. But of course, the experience in Power BI Desktop is much better, and now it's not even supported anymore under Excel.
I think you can still find it somewhere under the Excel settings. You can still turn on Power View, but you have to go digging for it in Excel.
Not in 0365.
Oh, is it gone now? Okay.
It's gone because the underlying technology, and now I need to remind Silverlight. Thanks. Silverlight is not supported by Microsoft anymore, as far as I know.
Okay, gone.
So you need to get an older version of Excel, I think 2016 or something,
Yeah,
to
okay.
to put your hands on it, and
Open it up.
nobody needs to do that anymore.
No good
And
reason.
if you go to the official documentation for Power View, which still exists,
Really?
you
Okay.
can click a link which leads you to Power BI desktop or Power BI service. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. But you used to be like a financial controller, or was it finance focused or not?
It was more business focused. I was a
Business?
controller. I always say financial controlling, maybe because of my limited English,
Oh,
just
okay.
to make sure it's a controller in a yeah
Overview sort of
business
control.
department. That
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. But lots of Excel use.
Yeah. I was usually the guy who was asked by almost all the people in the company how they could solve Excel problems. Later on, I specialized in VBA programming. Many people love about VBA, especially when they have a programming background. My wife is an IT person. I have a hard time here. But it allows business people who dig a bit deeper into the topic to do many crazy things, automate things, so you can focus on the real, I call it brain work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I loved VBA, and I always tried to automate things that I had to do 2 or 3 times manually. When I noticed, okay, this task occurs several times a month or every time each month, I invested the time, mostly spare time, to automate these things. And this, of course, is something you can do with Power Query pretty well.
Yeah. How have you found the impact now? So Power Query replacing a lot of your VBA work?
All the VBA.
All of it. Okay. Yeah.
I haven't touched VBA for years.
Yeah,
I guess the last thing, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this in a bit, was to create this Notepad++ editor, because
okay, yes, we will
because
get
I have no other programming skills like C# or something. I use VBA to create the files that are necessary. But
Okay.
that was the last time I programmed even a line of VBA code.
Yeah, I eventually built myself this sort of beautiful VBA sort of project with all the functionality I needed in that was ready to use for all my future jobs. You know, you write little bits of VBA code and then you use it again and you use it somewhere else. So I had this like mega file that had all this code in. And just at the time I got that down perfect, Power Query came along. And then I've never opened it again. It's sitting there.
Yeah.
I do once in a while, probably, I don't know, once every 2 months, do a little bit of VBA, but yeah, Power Query's just brought an end to it. So
Of course, there are things that you can't do with Power Query, like
Totally.
creating forms or something.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
usually what most of the VBA scripts do is importing data from external sources and transforming them. And yeah, that's what Power Query is made for.
I think for me now, it's purely a case of user control using VBA in Excel. So user control, locking things down, giving people, unhiding and showing, navigating, those sorts of things. Generating a PDF from something if somebody needs that. So,
Sure.
those sorts of tools. But so you made a leap then to become, so your current business is your own, you're a consultant now?
Yeah.
So what triggered that jump into consultancy?
I think that are different aspects, or that has different aspects. On the one hand, when I left school, I always wanted to be self-employed, but I never knew what to do. So
Right, yeah.
then I studied business administration and started as a controller and did that for 11 years. And I always liked this data wrangling stuff. I was always more interested in how to get the data and how to transform it than actually analyzing them.
Right.
And because I cannot say huge success, but it was like that people came to me and asked me how to do these things, I always felt a bit like a consultant. And I always loved to explain things to people and see this aha effects.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to be a teacher. This is what I initially studied, but then switched to business administration. And so when I got an MVP, I decided if I don't make myself a freelancer now, I will never do it. So that was the last thing I needed to become a freelancer.
Right.
I'm not sure if that was such a clever idea because the MVP has nothing to do with customer requests.
No.
That the community knows you has nothing to do with your potential customers.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm happy I made the decision, but because now it really works out.
I think there is this sort of idea that an MVP makes you more marketable to clients and things.
Not at all. Most of them ask, what is that behind you?
Yeah. Yeah. What's an MVP? I guess it's it's like any, qualification. It looks better to have one than not have one. But in terms of people's awareness of what it is, it's just like, oh, that's nice, and then things move on. So yeah, it's not the reason to do it, is not to help the business. There's far too much work involved in being an MVP, but you've got to enjoy it. If you don't want to do MVP stuff for the reward in terms of financial, because it's pointless. It's not what you do it.
Actually, sometimes, I don't know if you have that experience of this, but sometimes I get asked, what do I have to do to become an MVP?
Yeah.
And even though the answers could be very different because people have different ways to become it. Some of them speak at a lot of conferences, what I don't do. Others create videos, others write blogs. So it's very versatile. But my question always is, why do you want to become one?
Yeah.
I never had the idea of, I must become an MVP. It's a good idea to be one. Let's find out how to do that. It just appeared because I did what I liked.
And for those folks listening, if you don't know, so MVP stands for Most Valuable Professional. Microsoft award this sort of credential once a year. You have to submit all the blogs and articles and videos and other things you've done, conferences you've attended and presented at. So you've got to submit this body of work every year and you get renewed. So it's a lot of work, but it's the stuff we enjoy doing, and that's why we do it. And we happen to get a nice reward out of it in terms of I don't know what for you, Lars. What's the benefits of being an MVP? For me, it's probably contact with the developers of Excel and Power BI. Network, yeah. People you can ask and bounce ideas off and those sorts of things as well. For me, that's the sort of the main benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. It's the same with me.
Cool.
It's the network to people who think alike, like you.
Yeah.
And of course, by using networks like Twitter or being involved in user groups, your local user group or meanwhile worldwide, is a good way to connect to people. The MVP brought it to another level for me. But that's the only benefit. And that's not the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
When I started blogging, I did it for fun. When I became a freelancer, of course, it also was a kind of marketing. People need to find you. Otherwise, you can be the best expert in the world and you won't earn any money.
Yeah.
But this is why I'm doing it and not for the MVP.
So did you set up a user group?
Actually, I did the first one in Germany.
Wow.
Back in
Power
2015.
BI?
Yeah, Power BI user group.
Yeah.
But before that, I tried to find my place in other user groups when the Power BI tools were still in Excel. And I visited SQL Server user groups and stuff, and they already had tabular models because of the 2012 edition of SQL Server. Okay. But honestly, they all were still too deep into multidimensional and were a bit laughing about this Excel tool and what do you want to do with it? It doesn't really work, blah, 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 blah. I didn't feel quite comfortable there. I knew why they were reacting like this. I didn't feel they were bad people or something, but I knew we needed something on our own. And then I remember that like it was yesterday. I was with my wife and two friends of us in South Africa.
Okay.
And I got the email that Power BI, that Microsoft wants to start this Power BI user group thing, and you could apply? No. How
Apply?
can I apply? Thanks.
Apply?
Apply for a user group, and I did that, and it was confirmed 1 month later, and so the user group started in, I think, October 2015. Yeah.
Ah, okay. And are you still doing that regularly? Is that still going? Not
Yes.
as regular as you would like?
Yeah,
That's my
usually we did
scenario.
it. Yeah, usually we did it once a month and in
Yeah.
person before the
Okay.
pandemic, of course,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I like the remote opportunity. I'm thinking about doing it remotely, even when the pandemic ends, hopefully soon, because here in Hamburg I always struggled with getting free rooms to have the people sit together. That was always a problem, and remotely that's not such a problem. If you want to bring the people together for socializing, you can still meet 2 or 3 times a year in a bar and have a beer.
Yeah.
But we met once a month, and no, I'm sorry, every second month, 6 times a year. That was
Okay.
was needed from the Power BI team. That was necessary to meet at least
right.
six times a
Okay.
year.
Yeah.
So and now I'm just not having the time. Bringing the
Yeah.
kids to bed is always
Bring them along. They'd love a bit of Power BI.
most of my customers and most of my Power BI connections who I talk to like this via remote and camera know my boys already, because I have them always on my chair. But it makes it tough to organize a user group.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to come back to normal and have it once a month.
Okay. Well, good. So I'd like to talk about your blog and your podcast also. So let me read a blog post title of yours, right, from September 2014. So this is going back, right? So the title was How to Build Asymmetric Pivots on Power Pivot Data Models Using Named Sets, right?
Yeah.
Now, English is your second language and you're able to write stuff like that. Now, that's impressive.
There are good translators on the web. Google Translator is great, and we have deepl.com, which I prefer.
Okay, but that actually makes sense. So the translator, if it wasn't your, I think you're being modest, but that's impressive. We were chatting before we started recording about languages and stuff, and you know, I just hats off to everybody who blogs and does presentations in a second language. So are you there sort of translating everything in your head from one language to another for every response, or is it sort of a bit more natural? How often do you get to speak English?
Usually, really speaking, not just listening, a couple of times a year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
My customers are all from Germany or German-speaking countries, and I listen a lot to English stuff. All the conferences, all the Power BI stuff is in English. I like to listen to English-speaking podcasts like Joe Rogan. I listen a lot to English, but I speak it quite rarely.
Yeah, because I sort of my mother's language is Welsh, and that's her first language, and her side of the family all speak Welsh to each other. And I've picked up enough that I can understand it when it's spoken to some extent. But as soon as I have to have a conversation, I'm just lost after the opening, you know, hello, my name is, and then somebody replies to something because they think I'm fluent. And then I just look like a deer in the headlights, and I'm like, sorry. So yeah, it's impressive.
What I love about being raised bilingual is that you do not only know the words, it sounds like you're from that country. Yeah. I have friends who were raised bilingual in Brazilian Portuguese and German, And
Okay.
when they switch to the other language, they don't even sound German anymore.
Yeah.
I know my English is not that German. Hello, my name is.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. It's not my problem, but you definitely hear I'm not English speaking
Yeah.
by nature, and those people don't have that, and that is great. That's amazing.
That is impressive. So, what? Because you write your blog in both, don't you? You do English and German in your blog.
Yes. Yeah.
So, what was the decision there about? Sort of,
I wanted to distinguish between what I called personal marketing and the work for the community.
oh, okay.
When you create your own business and when you create your own blog, you should think about something that's called buying persona. Who are you working for? What's your perfect customer? And when I write my German blog posts, it's for this buying persona.
Okay.
And I try to keep it more simple. I want to try to solve a certain business problem with this, not necessarily explaining deeply why things work like this, but that things work like this, so that people
Yeah.
can go through it, click, 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 write the line of code, and their problem is solved. That's what I try with the German ones. And I try to be very close to what Gary Vaynerchuk emphasizes all the time. I'm not sure if you know that guy.
No.
He's a social influencer from the US,
Okay.
and he explains how to do social media. And he says, time for selfish content is over. Just saying, hey, I'm the greatest guy ever and buy my stuff. That doesn't work anymore. You have to create content that helps people without expecting anything.
Yeah.
And most of the people will never buy your stuff, but some will. And over time, that becomes business. That's the idea behind the German ones. The English ones that became pretty rare during the last month
Yeah.
are for the community.
Okay.
That's the idea
Yeah,
behind English and German.
Awesome. And then, how did you make the decision to start, or what drove you to do a podcast? In English language, interviewing people. Why the leap of to do that?
Well, I started blogging back in 2014, and the SSBI blog is not my first blog about Power BI. My first blog was Power BI -usergroup.de.
Okay.
That's the thing I started back in 2014 when Power BI was not even a thing. And this is why I'm a bit proud of the name Power BI user group, because Power BI didn't even exist then. I was asking myself, how could you name all this Power BI, Power tools in Excel all together? And I said, maybe it's Power BI.
Yeah.
And but that website was on Google Blogspot, and it wasn't really nice looking.
Okay.
And at the end of 2015, I got a bad lung inflammation, which made me sick for over 6 weeks.
Right.
And I lay down a long time, and after I surpassed the worst time of it, I had a lot of time for thinking, how do you want to move on in your career, or all the things you do. And I decided to learn how to build a good business website, a good blog.
Yeah.
That includes a good blog. And it took me 9 months to create this website on my own, because I didn't know anything about WordPress and how to build up a website.
So you've designed it all.
It's all mine, yes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
I bought the plugin that creates the layout, but everything else is my own. You don't have to program anything. You buy plugins, but it took some time.
Yeah.
And then I when I did it back in 2014, it was like I didn't know many people who dealt with these topics. In my company, there was one guy, a good friend, Uwe Mester, maybe you know one or the other Power Query article from him, who was interested in this stuff, but that was everything. I didn't know anyone else to talk to. Nobody wanted to talk to me about Power BI. So I did that for myself and just for exchanging information. And when I created my actual website. Of course, the idea changed a bit to making it a business.
Yeah, and that then sort of, was that what led to the MVP status as well? Did that sort of feed into
I
the
guess
MVP
so.
award? Yeah,
I guess so.
part of the contribution.
Yeah, the blog articles for sure. As I said, I don't attend conferences because of time issues.
Yeah,
My boys need a lot of time, and now the pandemic is there. We can do everything digitally, but you have to earn some money, and afterwards the boys are there and asking for your time. So there is no time in the evening and the nights to do that.
And when did you start the podcast then? What date did you start on that?
Last year in
Okay.
2019 was 2019. It was a couple of months before the pandemic started, I guess. In the meantime, we have more podcast hosts than podcast guests, I think.
Hey, you're looking at me there, Lars, as if I'm stealing your idea.
No.
Which I am, by the way.
It's a good thing because many people do cool stuff and also different stuff. The idea behind the podcast was the following. I was a bit bored of just writing and was thinking about using a new medium. And as I like to say, I have the perfect face for podcasting because people don't see me. I don't like to be on screen, honestly.
Yeah.
And when I was at my last employer, a German company called Otto, e-commerce company competitive to Amazon,
Okay.
I had the pleasure of having a self-marketing training. It took 3 days, I think, and we discussed how can you marketing yourself, of course, in that company, to be seen better by other people and make career and stuff. And one part of that was that I had to write an email to 20 people I know, different people, old friends, former bosses, whoever
Okay.
you wanted to, and ask for your strength. Not for
Right.
weaknesses, just for strength. And I got a lot of answers. They replied happily. And one thing that occurred many, many times was your voice. And
Okay.
so I thought, why not making this strength the main part of your new medium? And I thought, okay, you like to listen to podcasts, why not creating your own? And I started in German. And I thought, okay, then you do the same thing like with your blog, one track in German, the other one in English, but it didn't work. I like the time. I don't have so much time to do that. And there are not so many people in Germany that you can talk to this topic, especially when you really want to have the experts. All the experts at Microsoft speak English. I can invite Jeffrey Wong to talk about the invention of DAX and try to do that in German. That won't be successful, I think.
No.
So I just decided for going with English.
Yeah. And just sort of on a side sort of note a little bit, what is the take up like in Germany of Power BI? Is it sort of accelerating as fast as it seems to be in other parts of the world, or what's your view?
I guess we're a bit behind. When I started being a freelancer back in 2018, it was a bit disappointing because not many people knew what it was still.
Right.
And my personal opinion, I don't have any evidence for that, but my personal opinion is back then all the stuff about Power BI was in English, and people in Germany are still a bit reluctant in terms of consuming stuff that's not in German.
Okay.
That's my personal impression. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
And but now with O365 or Microsoft 365, Power BI has, how can I say, it's widely seen. And in the meantime, I get a lot of requests due to my website because people are Googling and trying to find solutions. It works in the meantime.
So going back to the podcast, how did you hook up with your guests? Do you just email them and say, hey, would you like to be on this new thing I'm doing? Or
Yep.
that was it?
It depends on how you're connected to them. I have no personal connection to Jeffrey Wong, for example.
Yeah.
So I had to write him a mail. And the good thing is, I tried to do something similar pre-podcast periods, because I have a section on my blog that interviewed people in a written form. And I did it with a couple of MVPs. I did it with at least 2 Microsoft employees. I guess it was Jeffrey Wong back then and Will Thompson, who replied. I wrote mails to a couple of other employees, but they simply didn't take the time to do that. And so we already were connected. And when I wanted to do the podcast with him, I just wrote the mail, hey, Jeffrey, maybe you remember we did that back then. And would you be willing to do it as a podcast? And he's such a nice person. He was so grateful for doing this. And I was the one who had to be grateful, but they are really acknowledging that we are spreading the word. I don't know if you have listened to the podcast episode, but he explains that they are delivering the features, but guys like the Italians, for example, are the ones who take that to those who will really use it. And
totally, I'm a big fan of the podcast, so I recommend folks.
Thank you.
Hook up to it and download it and subscribe. So is it? Are you doing some more episodes soon? Are we planning to?
Not soon. And honestly, as I said, in the meantime, there are many podcasts on the topic. And I really like to listen to the podcast made by Casper de Jong, for example.
Yes, that's one of my favorites too.
The thing is, many of the interviews he did were already on my to-do list, but due to the pandemic, I didn't have the time. So every time he releases a new podcast, I just make a cross on my to-do list because that thing is done.
Yeah. I think there's scope to interview people who've already been interviewed, just because you can have a different. Unless all the questions that you would ask have been asked, I think there's scope there, and a different
but
audience,
that's the thing.
Different time, and
it's not about this one has already been interviewed. I was thinking about interviewing Armin Netz, and he has already been interviewed by BI Focal.
Yes, yeah.
They have a great podcast themselves, and they do it for years now. So they are the godfathers of Power BI podcasts. So if that was my requirement, I couldn't have thought about interviewing Armin Netz again.
Yeah.
But Casper does a great job in asking good questions.
Yeah.
And having good questions is the crucial part with your podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm not thinking about interviewing Armin Netz soon.
When you come up with some good questions, then just get on the phone, give them a quick call. So what of your career that got you to where you are today, was there any particular role or person or something that really influenced the direction you took, or your learning of Excel and then Power BI and these sorts of things? Or
that's an interesting question. Yes, I guess so. I learned VBA on my own. I started reading blogs, reading books, and trying stuff, and suddenly it worked somehow. And then I thought it's time for doing it more professionally. And I wrote a mail to an author of one of the books I read and asked for a training course. And he offered training courses, not only for me, but for, I think we were 5 people in the room. So a 2.5-day VBA training course. He had 3 modules. His name is Bernd Held. 3 modules, and I skipped the first one and I did the second one. So, and after the second one, I think half a year later, I did the third module.
Right.
And then I was looking for something else, but there was no further module. So I asked him, what about doing a conference once a year where you are the presenter, and we do it with developers for developers and just exchange information?
Okay.
And he said, that's a great idea. You will become a trainer too. And I said, what? I don't want to. That was not my attempt. But
Right.
from that moment on, I was a trainer. I spoke in
Wow.
front of people, and the thing is, I was, I guess, by far the youngest in the room. All the others had 10 years, 20 years experience
Right.
in programming, at least in other languages, but also in VBA. And the funny outcome for me was I could teach them things. Because there are so many different aspects of a programming language. You can't know
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
No.
And that made me think, I can do this. I can talk. I'm always nervous. I was so nervous before we started doing this podcast, but while talking to you, I feel quite comfortable. And this is the
Yeah.
thing with me all the time.
Well,
This is what
we
people,
sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say we sort of, I think anybody from a analyst, sort of accounting, financy, number crunching type background, very rarely is a natural born speaker presenter. There's I would shy away from presenting and doing stuff, and now I'm doing YouTube videos and podcasts. But I'd be more than happy if all the lights went out and I just had my laptop
yeah,
and I just do some programming for the next 5 years. It's that sort of,
yeah,
it's the
exactly. It's
weird.
the same with me. Absolutely. The thing is, the more you do it, the better you become. Of course, it's all about repetition. And the good thing, and this is something I noticed very early on, is that I am nervous, but people never notice it. When I talk to people and tell them, oh, I did this speaking, but I was so nervous. And they all react like, what? You were so calm. And when you realize that in the meantime makes me a bit more calm beforehand, because I know
Yeah.
you can be as nervous as you want. People will not notice it.
I've got to the state now where, as long as I know my content and I've rehearsed it another time, then even if there is a bit of nerves beforehand, I don't worry, because if something goes wrong, we can just pause. People are forgiving. Especially when it's like free conferences and presentations. But if you know your topic, then people don't even know if you missed 5 minutes of what you were meant to say. You might beat yourself up afterwards, but no one else knows you forgot the 5 minutes. So you shouldn't stress about it. But
Yeah.
it is practice. It's only through doing it and feeling awkward and nervous, and you just do it more and more. And I don't think that feeling ever goes away totally, but you just, I don't know, get used to it a bit.
Yeah, I think the worst experience I had with this is I was on an Excel conference for 2 days, and in the evening they had some kind of more relaxed presentational stuff where you could show some nice use cases, and the people were sitting there with a beer in their hands and like this, and I prepared four examples what you could do with Power BI. I don't even remember what it was.
Right.
And I was staying in front of the room, and I didn't have the keys, and I didn't know that I need the keys. So all the people were waiting for me, and I couldn't open the room. So that was the first bad thing. Then I found out where I could get the key. I opened the room, people sat down, and I couldn't connect to the beamer. That was the second thing. So after those problems were solved, I showed my first example, and it didn't work. It simply did not work. And I was so nervous. And then I said, okay, we skip. We can just go to the next example. The second example didn't work either.
Oh, no.
So I was pretty close to jumping out of the window and running away.
Yeah.
The third and the fourth example worked. So we closed that session, and one of the attendees was another trainer. And he came to me and said, Lars, that was such a pity. I feel so sorry for you, but it was amazing how cool you stayed, how cool you were. And said, I was close to running away. There was nothing cool in me, but I appeared to be cool anyway. So
yeah.
that's
Cool.
a good thing, but I'm not responsible for it.
I think you may have just introduced a new feature into this show called My Worst Presentation Moment. I like that idea. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to drop it in. That's quite good. I'm just trying to think. I had one presentation where 3 people turned up. It was like a part of a CPA accounting conference thing. and you meant to bring your own computer along and sort of follow along and do a few things. And then 3 people right at the front row just said, "Oh, we've got our Macs with us. Can we? How do we install it?" And it's just like, you can't do it on a Mac. It's not possible. So I've got 3 angry people just staring at me, from the front, even though they were told in advance it doesn't work on a Mac. But no one reads those instructions before going to conferences. So
exactly, nobody does.
Things. Yeah.
But I have another one. If you let me to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You asked me how my first blog came up.
Right.
And the actual story behind it is I was on this Excel conference I was talking about, where I asked the guy, Bernd Held, if we could do that once a year. And I was actually on that conference, and it was in 2014. And my topic was, I taught in 2 sessions, 90 minutes each, how you could build up a solution using Access as a front end for SQL Server, creating VBA scripts, putting your external data through Access into SQL Server, and then connecting Power Pivot to SQL Server and creating measures and a pivot table and a report.
Okay.
So that took 2 times 90 minutes, 180 minutes. And because my whole work, day by day, my daily work was building up reports, I thought this could be interesting for those people. The room was filled with, I think, 20 or 25, mainly men, but also 2 or 3 women. And 2 guys were really amazed. That's great. This is exactly what I wanted. 3 people fell asleep in front of me. Really, they slept. And the others were like, yeah, where do I get the next newspaper from today? So, and after that, I noticed, okay, this stuff is interesting, at least for me and the 2 other guys, but I need to change the bubble. I need to change the audience. And this is exactly that evening I created my blog.
Excellent. And look where it led to. Time to get into Power Query. So I think I first came across your name in relation to the Power Query Editor. So using Notepad++.
Mm-hmm.
How do you even end up deciding to do that? What's the trigger that goes, I need something? Because maybe you just want to explain briefly what that was, and then sort of why you even developed it.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. For those who started with Power BI or Excel, since there is a support in the advanced editor for writing M formulas, M functions, there was a time where this simply wasn't available. M is a case-sensitive language, so writing table.select rows with a uppercase T doesn't succeed. You need lowercase t. You need an uppercase T to make it work. And if you have more complex code and you get an error message that is not telling you anything about the actual error, you need to get into the M code. And doing it in an editor that has no syntax highlighting, no parameter hints, no nothing, not even a search function, which you have in a normal text editor, is a pain in the ass. So I started Googling for an editor, and I found a very interesting article by one of the guys from the Power Query team, the engineering team at Microsoft, whose name is Matt Mason.
Oh, yeah.
He's one of the responsible guys, if not even the only one, for the actual advanced editor. He implemented the IntelliSense and the syntax highlighting and the parameter hints.
Right, yeah.
And he showed that it is possible to create our own language in Notepad++, a custom language. I didn't even know that. And his editor version, or his plugin, or however you want to call that, had this syntax highlighting. So if you type in or copy in table.select rows, this table.select rows gets a different color. So you can find keywords easily in a script. And of course, you have this inherent capability of Notepad++ finding opening and closing parentheses. So that was that was great, but there were more than 600 functions back then, and you didn't have IntelliSense, so or auto-completion, or however you want to call it. I want to type in table dot, and I want to see how all the other functions look like without using shared in Power Query. And I thought Notepad++ has it. All the other languages that exist in that tool have syntax highlighting. So I Googled in the documentation, or searched in the documentation for that feature, and there was a documentation that showed that you need a specific XML file with all the information, and then this is possible. Okay. So I was aware.
So sorry, Lars. At this point, I'd have given up. Right? You kept going. Why? Why did you keep going and decide to keep exploring?
Because I didn't have twins back then.
You had spare time.
Exactly. No, I worked with Power Query a lot, and maintaining the code was such a painful experience.
Okay.
And I thought I could do something in the beginning for me, and then also for the community. But of course, I needed all the information that are necessary for this editor. You need the function names, which you can get by using shared. But you need all the parameters. You need all the types. You need all the types for the parameters. So the types for the function itself and the parameters. And I didn't even know how to do that. So I wrote a mail to Matt Mason and asked for that. And he said, great idea. I will forward that to a colleague of mine. And that colleague sent me an M script that provided me this information as a table.
Okay.
So with every new release of Power BI Desktop, which happens to appear every single month, as you know, I needed to get all this new information. So I had this script. I exported this table of function names and parameters from Power Query into my own Excel file. And then comes the last VBA script I ever used, and that converted this table into an XML file.
Okay.
That was necessary for Notepad++, and that worked. And the funny thing is, I put that on my blog back in 2015, my old blog, powerbi-usergroup.de, and nobody really read it. And then something changed in the query, or behind the query that this guy from Microsoft sent to me, and I didn't get any output anymore. So I didn't invest the time to make that work properly, so I just stopped it. I didn't do anything about it. And then in 2017, I was at the UK Power BI Summit, which was organized by Jen Stirrup back then.
Okay, yeah.
And I was sitting in a room of more or less 100 people. And they were talking about different things. I was working on my computer, and then someone mentioned, hey, there is a M plugin for Notepad++. And the guy who invented it is sitting in this room.
Right.
I wasn't thinking I had developed a plugin for Notepad++. I just wrote a small XML file. So I didn't think they were talking about me, and I just kept on creating on my PC. And suddenly that guy went out, having his laptop in his hand, and I saw him walking out, and on his screen was my LinkedIn profile.
Wow.
And I thought, he's talking about me. And then I went out and had a talk to him, and he said, this is such a great thing, you have to make that work again. And then I did that on my new blog, and that eventually was a big part of becoming an MVP, because people knew me for this tool.
Yeah. Well, it's just so useful. You know, it just it was essential. It was just so slow and, buggy to try and build your own code. It's so easy to make a mistake that, you filled that real need that people had. So youngsters today don't know how good they've got it with IntelliSense built in.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, that was necessary. Such a tool needs support for those who code.
So
And now we have it. It's not beautiful, as you know. The editor is still a bit buggy, and if you use the tab key,
it kills me every
it's not good
time.
what you get. But anyway, you have support, and this is why I don't support my editor anymore. You can still download the latest version, but it's not necessary to just download Power BI Desktop in the newest version, and that's it.
And when did you first come across Power Query? Do you have a memory of going, what is this? What is this thing?
It already had the name Power Query. It was not Data Explorer anymore. So I'm definitely one of those who were there in the very early days, like Chris Webb mentioned in your last episode. But I guess it was 2014, early 2014, I think.
Yeah.
Must have been that time.
And
honestly, in the beginning, I didn't really understand what this thing is for.
Okay.
I knew what Power Query was. My knowledge about data modeling wasn't that good. I'm not pretty sure if I knew the term star schema back then.
No, I didn't.
So, as many people still do it, I imported my data as is. And I did it with a Power Pivot, because before we had a Power Query, there was no other way than importing it with the tools in Power Pivot. And because I knew Access, I'm not a SQL guy. I'm not capable of writing SQL fluently. Just I would
sounds
do
the same as me.
with it. Yeah, but you have a nice graphical interface in Access, which makes you clicky, draggy, grubby for SQL, more or less.
Yeah.
And because of that, I thought, okay, you don't need Power Query. Of course, there were many cool connectors to very fancy data sources, but my daily business was Excel, CSV, TXT files, and maybe accessing SQL Server. That was easily possible with Access. And I remember a guy writing me a message on Xing, which is a German competitor to LinkedIn, telling me, hey, your articles are good, but you need to get into Power Query. And I answered him, thanks for that hint, but I guess I don't need to, because I know Access and that's fine. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
And the more I noticed what necessary transformations are, the more I valued what's possible with Power Query. And I remember, I know you're a big fan of Unpivot and Unpivot other columns, as I am too.
Yeah.
And I remember after I noticed that, I wrote an article on my old blog that said, okay, Unpivot is possible with Power Query, but I guess it's not possible if your table has a header across several lines, several rows. So if your table has a header with 3 or 4 or 5 rows, that's not possible with Power Query. So here is the VBA solution. Yeah, and of course it's possible with Power Query. And that's my advice for people who start early on with Power Query. If you doubt if something is possible with Power Query, just assume it is and try to find out how, because most of it works.
And you mentioned your favorite feature was the custom functions. So do you have a use case or an example of where you might use custom functions?
It's the start of every Power BI project, my custom calendar table.
Okay.
There are many more, but that's the one I use all the time. Actually, I'm writing a German blog post right now where I provide people with my calendar table that I use in almost every project that is based on this function. And if you know there's something you use all day long, why doing it all the time again manually?
Yeah, totally. And sort of what is those sorts of bits, or is there any part of Power Query that interests you more than other bits? Are you into the M code? Are you a fan of the user interface part and just showing people how easy it is with clicking stuff, or what's your feeling on
that? that depends on the case and what your audience is. As I said, when I write when I write a German article, I try to keep it simple. I try to solve problems, and then of course I try to find solutions. Even though they are more advanced with writing M codes, I try to find solutions by using the user interface. And as I said before, you press record. It was a hard decision for me to decide which is my favorite feature in Power Query, because encapsulating business logic into a reusable function is a wonderful thing, but the whole UI in Power Query is a wonderful thing, because all this functionality that you get by clicking a couple of buttons is amazing. And when Power Query, when Power BI got 3 years old, so 2 years back, I wrote an article on my website that compared the version of Power BI Desktop at that time with the first version that ever appeared, which was, I guess, Power BI Designer Preview from January 2015.
Right.
I guess that was the first version, and I still had it on my hard drive. The tool looked completely different. Everything, the data modeling capability, I'm not quite sure if it was even there. It definitely was, but it looked absolutely different. But the Power Query Editor was almost the same, which doesn't mean that this tool didn't develop. In my opinion, it just means it was very mature right from the beginning. And it still is. You get new features. Mainly, when you see new functions in Power Query every month, usually it are connectors.
Yes.
Because a new data source is added, but the functionality itself, the ability to do more transformations and stuff, it usually makes life easier, but usually it's a functionality that you already had, but it was more complicated to apply it.
It seems now that the intention is that the online, data flows Power Query Online essentially. Why do they name stuff so weirdly? I don't know, it just gets to me.
Don't ask me.
So people ask me what are data flows, and I say, well, it's just a folder of Power Query tables. All right. Why do they call it data flows? I don't know. So there's more to it, but that's a simple explanation. But the user interface in there, they're just transforming that. There's the diagram view, there's more indicators. So really looking forward to that stuff coming into the desktop.
Oh yeah,
that'll be good. That'll be good when that will, and eventually Excel hopefully will get that stuff as well at some point. But maybe we'll
crossing fingers here.
Do you use much Excel these days?
Honestly, not very much. No. I have a couple of customers who have solutions in Power Query and Excel. And of course, I try to help them, support them with, query performance or just adding some logic. But mainly it's Power BI. Yeah.
I'm definitely our company swung a lot more, 70% Power BI now, 30% Excel, having been an Excel consulting and training firm. So it's changed a lot. So your blog is called Self-Service BI or SSBI. So what do you see as the difference then between, that business intelligence solution of 10 years ago and this concept of self-service BI? What's changed?
To talk about change, I would need to know how it was back then. I was never a developer for enterprise BI solutions with, for instance, SQL Server analysis, service multidimensional. That's a world that's really hidden for me. I don't know anything about MDX. I can only imagine how it was because, excuse me.
And were you ever involved in implementing? Maybe in charge of a company was implementing a new business intelligence system where you had to get scoping requirements. I got involved with one of those once, and it wasn't a great experience. It was just long and painful.
We were trying to implement BI solutions without BI tools. So we were
Excel.
mainly Excel with pivot tables, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And the funny thing is when you listen to the, I don't know if it's funny, but it was interesting. When you listen to my episode with Alberto Ferrari, when he talks about how he came into BI, it was an Excel pivot table. Marco
Yes,
showed him an
I
Excel
remember.
pivot table, and he was,
Yeah.
this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. That was so amazing
Yes,
to
yeah.
hear that.
I remember him saying that now. Yeah, that was awesome. Just it's how you get into this stuff. So, yeah, what do you imagine then has changed? And or what do you term as self-service? You know, that's my question really.
The difference, because I had this interview with Jeffrey Wong, who told me that in multidimensional, you would not have even been able to load a single line of data, a single row of a table, before everything and the whole data model was defined. You needed the tables, you needed the fields, you needed the dimensions, the facts, the hierarchies, the data types, everything before you could load anything into it. Yeah. So there was no way to do what today is called agile development, I guess. So just loading something and see if it works. And this is definitely possible with Tabula. And otherwise you would not be able to get any business person into developing business intelligence solutions. Yeah. And that's what I call self-service, the ability to do it. That you have enough power on a usual PC to use this engine, that you can install it, and that you can run it without needing a whole group of consultants and many servers and 30,000 euro or dollar initial costs before starting anything.
Yeah, yeah.
But on the other hand, many people understand self-service as everybody can do it, as if they could do it without knowledge.
Yes.
And you can't use any software without knowledge. I see so many people sitting in front of Excel because it just was on their working PC without any training. The employer expects them to know everything. They don't know anything. And then in the end, it's Excel that's the bad software. No, it was the employer who didn't sell any money or give any money for the employee to be trained in that particular software.
There is this assumption that people just, you used a piece of software or something in your last job, let's say Excel, and therefore you know how to use it. And people just go from job to job, never getting any formal training.
And when you apply for a job and you get the question, how good are you in Excel? All the people say, I'm good. I know how to write the sum function.
Yeah.
The only company in which I saw that people had to make a test in Excel was one of the companies I worked for, and I created the test because I couldn't stand this. I don't want it to throw people out of the program, or didn't want to have them as a colleague. Yeah. But I couldn't stand that the potential boss is asking, how are your Excel skills? And they say good, and that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah. Especially when it's so key to certain jobs.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, and nobody ranks themselves as, intermediate. You're either beginner or you're advanced. No one's ever in the middle. No one ever claims to be in. And full admission, when I joined this company that I work for now, 14 years ago, I thought I was the bee's knees of Excel, right? I was the expert of Excel, and anybody you chat to from my old companies would have been, Win was the Excel guy, right? And I started and worked with these people who were professional Excel developers, and I realized I knew this much. I realized how bad my VBA code was, how clunky my formulas were, all this sort of stuff. Yeah, you can always learn more. You can always learn.
Have you read the PAT, Professional Excel Development, that book?
No.
That was an eye opener for me. That was so amazing. By Steve Bullen, I think, and a couple of other guys I don't remember.
Still it's relevant really, now? Do you think still relevant today?
I think so, yeah, because it teaches you the fundamentals of programming. Those guys don't only program VBA; they know other languages as well. and you get a really good structure. I read it, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. But it was an eye-opener. I can only suggest having a copy of that on your
send me a link, and we'll put a link in the show notes.
I'll do that.
Awesome. Okay, right. Let's do the impossible questions section. So here's some questions.
I'm scared now.
Yeah, you should not know the answer to any of these. I'm going to struggle as this podcast season goes on. The questions are going to get harder and harder as I run out of things to find. So, yeah, I might have to change how it works. Okay, so question 1, and your expected answer is I don't know. Right? I didn't know any of these answers.
That's impossible.
That's impossible. So in the Power Query Editor, you've got the various tabs across the top. There's Home and there's Add Columns. And then there's the View tab. And in the View tab, you have Query Dependencies that brings up a little diagram. Okay.
Yeah.
So question 1 regarding that. How many different layout options are there for query dependencies? Because there's a tiny little drop down and you can say, I want it to change from vertical to there's how many options?
Really? There's more than one?
There's more than one?
I've never used that.
Never clicked it. Okay, so there's 4. There's 4. There we go.
Really?
Yeah.
And what are they doing?
I prefer the horizontal layout, left to right, rather than
it's
top
just
to bottom.
changing. Okay, it's just
the
for the layout.
direction that the shapes go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So never press that button.
There you go. What color in that query dependencies view? What color do the table headings change to when you click on a table? And I want 2 answers. What color do the tables go in Excel? And what colors do the tables go in Power BI? So you click on a table, it lights up the sort of chain of related tables. So what color do the table headers go?
As I said, I'm mainly using Power BI Desktop, so I go for that one. But
okay.
Is it orange?
Yeah, it's the Power BI orangey yellow.
Yeah.
And is it the same in Excel or different?
I have no clue.
Okay, it's green. Excel green.
Yeah, makes sense.
Why they made it different, I don't know. Right. When you use the formula bar in the Power Query Editor window, so, we're into your world here now, Lars. We're into the M code. You're in the formula bar and you expand the formula bar out to its full height. Mm-hmm. How many rows of formula can you show?
Oh, there aren't many. 4 or 6 rows.
5. Yeah, give you full marks, 5 rows. Be nice if it could go a bit bigger, but 5 rows. Good answer.
Remember how it was with the DAX bar? Suddenly it was the whole screen.
Oh, true. Be careful what you wish for. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Detachable. That's what
if you want to have more, you can go to the advanced editor.
Right. There's an official Power Query blog. I don't know if you've been on that yet. It's powerquery.com.
Yes.
And what is the topic of the most recent post? I know this is unfair. I only looked just before this interview.
I know that website. They implemented that blog only a couple of months ago.
By the way, my a few days ago was the latest one on the 26th of May.
Haven't read that.
The Power Query team is hiring. That's the name of the post. Get a job with Power Query team, so go check it out, powerquery.com.
Unfortunately, I know a couple of guys there. They know really a lot of stuff about programming, so this is not a thing that I could do.
No.
Would be amazing job.
I often see these jobs coming up with Microsoft, like Excel team working with the Power. It's like, oh, that sounds good, but I couldn't do it, but I'd like to.
Would that be something you're interested in if you had the capabilities?
Not at this stage of my life, but it was one of those ones that, dream job, if you could get in there early on. But I'm happy with how things are going now, so I don't want to make a change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But Great. It's tempting. But, if I was, what about yourself?
It's the same with me. I turned 40 a couple of months ago. I have 2 kids. We are happy in Hamburg. That wouldn't work.
No.
When you have to move to Redmond. But 10 years ago.
Yeah,
But
I know.
yeah, honestly, I don't have something to offer. They would need to develop the product, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
I wouldn't be able to do it even if I wanted to. So, right, last question.
by
Sorry, go on.
by the way, before you move on, the blog you were talking about, so Power Query, Microsoft.Power Query or
Oh,
PowerQuery.microsoft.com.
well, if you type in powerquery.com, then it's redirects
converts it.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Your website is on it as resource, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Go.
Mine as well.
You got to. So go onto there. There's extra resources in. There's a few links. So we're on there. It's all good. Last question then. So other than in Excel and Power BI desktop, where else can you find M? I want 2 places that M code can be used other than
Data
Excel.
flows and
Yes.
SQL Server Analysis Services 2019, I think. Azure Analysis Services. Yeah.
Wow, that's good. Do you know? Oh, yeah, there's a few others, but awesome. Good answer. Okay, it's getting everywhere now. It's taking over the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Is there anything in the future that you would? So good answers. You've answered more than I would have ever got the answer to. So well done. You get no prize, unfortunately. What would you
fine
like
with
to
that.
see? What would you like to see in terms of the future developments? Are there any user voice things or features or annoyances with Power Query? Or
I would like the editor to work better, because
yes,
now we have all these things I was looking for 2 years ago, like IntelliSense and syntax highlighting. But as we both know, using tab stuff leads to a function that doesn't work. You have to delete certain parts of the code. It's a pain still. And I would love to see 2 things. One is, it should be pretty simple to accomplish, which is a search bar for queries. You have a search bar for measures in the data model, but you have no search bar for queries in the query editor.
yeah,
And if you do it like I like to do it, having several queries, like an import query, a transformation query, a load query, a folder for utilities, for functions, for variables, then this list gets longer and longer, and suddenly you extend or you leave the screen, you get the scroll bar, and then you need to search for something, and yeah, without this search box, it's a pain. And if you're asking for a more advanced thing, I once had a discussion with Chris Webb about, he named Power Query almost an ETL tool or something like that. No complete ETL tool. And I was asking him why it's not a complete ETL tool. And he said because it's predefined where you load your data to. And in Excel, you have the data model or the sheet. In Power BI Desktop, it's always the data model, or you just do a not loading query as intermediate step, which is, of course, also possible in Excel. But you don't have the possibility to export your query as a CSV or XML or JSON file or something to your hard drive and reuse it in other terms. That's something that could be really interesting.
Okay. Anything coming up in the coming 6 to 12 months? Are you just head down getting on with life as normal, or is there any sort of plans for anything?
I don't know how far you are with vaccination in Australia, but here in Germany, we are pretty on a good way, I think.
Okay.
And next Friday I will get my first shot.
Oh yeah.
And the Monday after we will bring our kids back to kindergarten. So that brings more working time back to what I call a normal life. It's with a smiling and a crying eye, because having the boys at home is a wonderful thing. You see so many things that you wouldn't when they are in the kindergarten, but on the other hand, you hardly can work when they are here.
Yeah.
So we decided to bring them back, and then I've got time for social media again, and then I hopefully get my creativity back.
We'll be back.
I will look into streaming. This is something I want to do. I'm not sure if it's possible, but that's interesting too. Yeah, let's see what the future brings.
And you posted on Twitter the other day, and I really advise people to jump onto Twitter for learning stuff.
Yes,
I learn so much from Twitter. It's an awesome resource. You follow the right people. You don't follow all the nonsense. You follow, people who post good content, and you just get a good feed of all sorts. And the problem is, you just feel like you're missing out on everything because you haven't got enough time to read all the content.
Yeah, that's an issue. And when the pandemic started, and really my wife and me, we really felt pretty exhausted during that time, as many people on this planet will have felt, I think. I stopped using social media completely because that was just not possible anymore. And now I'm trying to recover.
Trying to get back in. But I've got to ask you, so on Twitter you posted about your new computer you bought. So for listeners, explain what crazy machine you have purchased.
I always had the brand Alienware from Dell in my mind, and was thinking about buying one because nowadays everything works from home office, and I had a laptop for the last 10 or 12 years, and now it was time for the first desktop again. And a friend of us, we both know Reed Havens a bit. Yeah. He bought such a machine, such a monster, a couple of months ago, and we had a quick chat about it. And I decided to buy an Alienware Aurora R10 with an AMD processor and 16 cores.
16 cores. Okay.
16 cores and 32, I don't know, how is it called? Virtual processors. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not so deep into hardware. A ridiculously amount of RAM, 128 gigabyte RAM, and a really nice graphic card, GPU. Yeah. So hopefully it will last for a couple of years.
Wow, that should. Yeah. Have you fired it up yet? Have you turned it on and had a?
Actually, I'm using it right now.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Yeah.
Did you open up any old reports and all of a sudden they're like instant or?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did. Some reports that loaded around 3 minutes are now there in 15 seconds.
Did you say, so 128 megabyte of RAM, yeah?
Gigabyte.
Gigabyte of RAM?
We're in the gigabyte era.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
Of course it is. Yeah, I'm thinking back in the old days. What am I talking about?
Yes. Yeah. No floppy disks.
Wow. Yeah, external drive. Tape player to load your games in. Wow, yeah. That is insane. Okay, so everything just fires up, and you could even have Teams running while doing a Power BI report, probably.
No, I think that's still not possible. Therefore, you have to 256.
You just run Teams on a different laptop.
Yeah, I guess I don't have this crazy amount of rows in my data sources. When I work for customers, it's usually a tiny amount of data. But as you know, you have a lot of things on your computer that require RAM. Even if you open a couple of Chrome tabs or something, it blows up. And then you have Zoom and you have Teams and you have video editing software and streaming software. And just wanted to make sure that there's always enough RAM.
Yeah, awesome. There always will be. So before we wrap things up, I like to ask my guest, have you ever had any sort of brushes with fame, or have you got a little known fact? Have you met a famous person, or, is there anything you're willing to share about some secret skill? So what would you say to that? I
guess fame depends on in which bubble you are. If I told you that I once had the pleasure of training together with Braulio Estima, I guess you wouldn't say it's a famous person.
Yeah.
But if you're into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what I was until 4 years ago, he's a very, very famous guy.
Okay.
If I tell my parents that I had the pleasure of talking to Marco Russo or Alberto Ferrari, they would say, "Hey, that's amazing! In which Hollywood movie are they playing or acting?" True. So if this is the kind of fame you're asking for, then these are the names I would give you. But
awesome.
No one else. No Mel Gibson or Tom Cruise.
None of those things. Okay. And then one requirement for coming on the Power Query Magic show is you need to leave 2 of your own articles, stroke blogs, your favorite and your most popular. So what are you going to leave us?
I'll start with the most popular, but I can't give you a single answer.
Okay.
We were already talking about the Power Query Editor, and this was the single most read article on my blog ever.
Right.
Since we had this GDPR thing some time back, I lost all my statistics for a while because I canceled Google Analytics, but this thing was amazingly often clicked.
Yeah.
But since we have this editor in place, this is of course not the one that gets so many clicks anymore. And now it's my article about lists in Power Query, how, when, and why. That gets 100, 150 clicks every single day except weekends.
Yeah.
And I used to write a series about how, when, and why, about lists, records, and tables, because I wanted to let people know which data objects in Power Query are there and why you should use them. And honestly, I use it as my own documentation more often.
Yeah.
But the list one gets clicked far more often than the other ones.
Okay, well, we'll put links to all those in the show notes. And then your favorite?
My favorite is a 4-part series about the environment concept in M.
Oh, okay.
I wrote that together with my good friend Imke Feldman. And the environment concept is something that other people would know from other languages, which is called scope there. Or when you dealing with VBA, usually a variable can be used within the same script, but not can be called from another script.
Right, yeah.
You can declare it as a public variable, then that works. And that is the scope. When can you reference what? In Power Query, it's the same thing. You can reference a query from within another query, but only the output of that query. You can't query a single step within that query just by calling the name. It simply doesn't work.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that work? And why does the other stuff work? And that's the environment concept that introduces this. And it's a thing that's spread over the whole official Power Query documentation, this big PDF document that you can read. It's pretty technical. It's hard to understand for a business person. And why is that my favorite one? Because I once visited Imke at her home, and we did a weekend about Power Query, and she showed me some stuff that worked, and I simply did not understand why it worked. I saw it works, but I could not understand why.
Right.
And I went home, and it took me 3 months to write these 4 articles. And I went through this documentation, and I called Imke and I said, I think I know why it works. Oh, and then afterwards we found out, no, that wasn't the thing. And I started writing it down in a hopefully very good understandable way, how this environment concept impacts the language and why you sometimes get very strange error messages that don't tell you anything, but their root cause is this environment concept.
And then finally, I'm going to strand you on a desert island. You're allowed 1 item to take with you. It could be practical, it could be luxury, but it must begin with M in honor of the M language. So
yes.
What are you going to take?
Because I'm on a single island, I go more with a practical thing than a luxury thing.
Okay.
And even though I was a bit surprised because I watched or listened to your 2 other episodes with Ken Pultz and Chris Webb, and Ken Pultz already said Machidi. I thought I can't do that on my own. But in contrast to Ken, I have my own.
Lars is now holding up a machete. Okay. It's not something everybody has next to their mouse on their desktop, Lars.
And you okay, I have it next to my desktop because we're talking now. But people might ask, why do you have a machete at home? And I always have to smile when I see Matthew Roach from the Power BI Cat team on Twitter, because he's such a longsword fan and has all these swords in his bag. And when I was younger, I did a lot of martial arts, not only Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but also German Jiu-Jitsu and also Filipino martial arts. Okay. This is why I collected a couple of, is there a word, rattan sticks?
Oh, yeah.
In English?
I know.
I have a couple of them and also a couple of machetes because we were all fans of blades and knives, and there are still a couple of them left. And the good thing is my boys are not really interested in them, so they can stay here for a while.
Keep their fingers away. So that's what you're taking?
Yes.
Awesome. Good choice. And you've even got it. So I didn't even have to give it to you or buy. So you're saving me money as well. Awesome. Perfect. So that wraps it up. Thank you very much, Lars, for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. It's been great. I'll leave details to all the links and stuff we've discussed in the show notes. Keep sharing the magic, and I will speak to you again some point soon, hopefully.
Would be great. All the best to you.